Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimers is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like, no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy, bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says, "He's cute, but he's not that cute." What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do?
Storytime about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse, and I had been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid, and just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7 and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready. And I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker, literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking, he was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back, it's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, hey, can I talk to you? I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here. And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home. Like, okay, sis, this
Grandma walked in on me and my cousin doing it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. My grandmother is a 97-year-old woman. She survived the war. As a teenager, she worked in a factory. This woman is made of steel. Well, my 19-year-old cousin, who I hadn't seen in 3 years, came over with his parents. And let me tell you, it was lust at first sight. By the way, I'm an only child, so I am used to getting what I want. And as soon as I saw him, I knew that I wanted him. I know, it's sick and twisted, but he's my third cousin. So I guess it really doesn't count that he's my cousin, right? So 2 months ago, my dad moved my grandma into our house. And we started planning her 97th birthday party. So my cousin and his parents started coming over more often. And every time we would see each other, we would just like stare at each other. We would flirt a little bit. I knew that he was into me just as much as I was into him. Around the 4th time they came over to our house, I asked him if he wanted to see my room. Our parents didn't suspect a thing. In my room, he asked me if he could kiss me. And I said yes. We took off our shirts and started making out. Part 2 is up. Making out with my cousin in my bedroom, I could hear my parents calling from downstairs. We put our shirts back on and pretended like nothing happened. Like I said in part 1, we were planning my 97-year-old grandma's birthday party. So my cousin and his parents were coming around the house pretty often. And every time he would come over to my house, we would pretend that we were going to do something on my laptop upstairs. When in reality, we were just making out. One of the times they came over, my parents started getting pretty drunk. And this was great for me because he and I could just go up to my room and they wouldn't notice. So once we get up there, he starts trying to take off all my clothes. And I'm like, nope. I may make out with my cousin, but I have some self-respect, okay? And I gave in and we did a few naughty things, but I don't kiss and tell. That same weekend was my grandma's birthday party, and I pretty much knew that things were gonna go down with my cousin. He was even planning how it was gonna happen. We would wait until everyone was drunk enough downstairs to come up to my room. So that's what we did. There were so many people at our house for the birthday party. We had music, lights, and catering, so pretty much no one would notice that we were gone. We head up to my room and instantly start taking off our clothes. We're both down to our underwear and start kissing on the bed. That's when we get fully naked. Part 3 is up. Cousin and I are fully naked making out on my bed. And here is where I failed. I thought I locked my bedroom door, but I didn't. We go from making out to doing more stuff, and then more and more stuff. He's on top of me at this point, so I can't really see my door. My cousin and I are going at it. Then all I hear is my door creaking open. We stop and look over his shoulder. That's when we see our grandmother. But here's the thing. She couldn't actually open the door all the way. My hamper was right behind the door. My bed is behind the door. So at this point, he gets off of me and we're both trying to get dressed as quickly as possible. And my grandma just says, are you coming down to the party or not? Then she fully opens the door. I'm halfway dressed and he is less than halfway dressed. She actually started laughing and says, oh, I knew you guys were up to something. Then she said, don't worry, I won't tell anyone. My cousin and I looked at each other and didn't say a word. That's when she says, you two better come downstairs before someone else comes up. I actually could not believe it. We end up going downstairs and have a great time with our families. Later that night, my grandma pulls me aside and says, life is short, so you should have fun. But try to not have too much fun with your cousin. But yeah, this didn't stop us. After the party, I ended up going to his house and we finished the job there. Am I really disgusting for this? We've been doing it every day. This is how I found out my ex was grooming my little cousin. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. At this point, I had walked in on my boyfriend with a 12-year-old girl. This little girl told me that my ex was her boyfriend. I called the cops and they came right away. A few weeks later, the cops came to our house and told us that they had found some messages on his phone and that they were from my little cousin. He had met my entire family. And of course, he had met all my little cousins. One of them being an 11-year-old girl. After the day he met her, he found her on Instagram and started sending her messages. And of course, she wrote back. She's a little girl. Why would she think anything was wrong? But side note, I was really angry at my aunt for even letting her 11-year-old daughter have an Instagram. Unchaperoned, by the way. It's not like my aunt was checking her messages or anything. My husband had decided that he wanted to meet up with her at a park. He even told her not to tell anyone or me. I'm terrified at the thought of what he would have done to her if he'd gotten her alone at the park. Like I said in part 3, he's in prison. The cops had found over 30 little girls that he was in contact with. So if you have a kid, please do not let them have Instagram. If they have their own cell phone, please check their messages. He also used Snapchat as a way to getting to kids. So don't let them have Snapchat. Luckily, my little cousin is okay. She has no idea what happened. My aunt took away her cell phone and gave her a flip phone instead. Are you the type of parent that lets their kids have social media unmonitored? Hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husbands. Bye.
Storytime about why I hate my brother's girlfriend. So a little background information. I was 14 years old and had just started my freshman year of high school. And my brother and his girlfriend were both seniors. And we're going to call his girlfriend Riley. Now, Riley and my brother started dating in the middle of the summer. And you would think since they just started dating and basically just met each other that I wouldn't know her that well. But literally 2 days after they started dating, she started spending every single day at my house. I'm being serious, like she had a whole duffel bag that had basically her closet in it. But that wasn't the problem. So in the summertime, my parents would plan a lot of family activities. And since they were called family activities, his girlfriend wasn't allowed to go. I mean, I think she would have been allowed to go, but she was also really disrespectful to my mom. So after one of our family days, my parents asked my brother if Riley would be joining us for dinner. And he just ignored them and went up to his room. And my room's right next to his, so I could hear everything. And Riley called him like for part 2. Part 2 about why I hate my brother's girlfriend. So like I said, my room was right next to my brother, so I could literally hear everything. And I guess Riley called him and she was complaining about me. She was like, she's the reason why your mom doesn't like me. I feel like she's jealous of me. She doesn't want us to be together. Which was really weird because I didn't give a fuck about what my brother did. So fast forward, school finally starts. And Riley lived about 20 minutes away from us. So my brother told her that he couldn't go and pick her up for school every day. But obviously I would ride to school with him because we lived together. Anyways, eventually she had a problem with that too. So my brother and I had to start leaving 30 minutes early to get to school so we could pick her up. So the first time that we pick her up, we pull up to her house. And obviously I'm in the front seat and she's just standing there. So my brother rolls down the window and he's like, get in the fucking car, we're gonna be late. And then she literally has the audacity to start arguing with my brother in front of me about why she should get the front seat instead of me. Like for part 3. Part 3 about why I hated my brother's girlfriend. So like I said, once she got in, she started screaming about how she should get the front seat instead of me. So I turn around and I'm like, last time I checked, you've only been here for 2 months. Stay in your fucking lane. And then she starts crying because she's like, oh my god, your sister's so mean to me. Like, I just feel like I should have more respect as his girlfriend. So fast forward to the weekend, my mom said that she needs to have a talk with me. And she's like, honey, I know you may not like your brother's girlfriend, but you have to stop being mean to her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've only had one conversation with her in the last week. And that was to tell her to stay in her fucking lane. And then I told her about everything going on. So she calls my brother down to ask him if it's true. And my brother was pretty pissed off at me, but he wouldn't lie. So my mom said that she was not allowed over the house anymore. And that he wasn't allowed to go pick her up from school until I got my license. So that just caused more problems between her and my brother, so he broke up with her. And then she started spreading rumors that she broke up with him because there was something weird going on between him and I.
This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on Instagram. My mom and dad had me when they were really young. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. For some reason, my mom doesn't like talking about him, so I never really found out exactly how they broke up. All I know is that they stayed together until I was 5 years old. Something really bad happened and then my mom kicked him out of the house. Like I said, I don't even know what happened. I was 12 years old, he begged my mom to come back, and she let him live in the apartment we had. But he's pretty much a deadbeat. He didn't help my mom pay for the bills. He didn't even want to get a job. He even went as far as begging my mom to become a stripper. He said that she would make way more money than the job she had. She was a secretary at the time. When I was 15, he left our house again. I never got a bad feeling from him when he was living with us though. With a lot of hard work, my mom was able to put me through college. I graduated and I got a really good job. I bought my mom and me a house and we moved in together. Then COVID happened and I lost my job. A friend suggested I start OnlyFans and I decided to do it. I started making a lot more money than I ever thought I would. Some months I was making around $20,000. This one guy would send me $1,000 every single week. In exchange for pictures. Part 2 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on my Instagram. So this one guy started sending me $1,000 every single week. In exchange, I would send him private photos. Everything was totally fine until he started asking me questions. He would ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite dessert? Because it's OnlyFans, I never really answered honestly. But then one day he told me, you love The Little Mermaid, don't you? And I was like, what? Because The Little Mermaid was my favorite movie as a kid. Watched it at least 3 times a week when I was a kid. First I thought it was a cousin playing a joke on me, so I decided to block them. The next day, I get another message. This one says, I remember how you used to love hot dogs. That's when I really shit myself. Because my dad and I would make hot dogs every single Friday. It was our thing together. Like I said, he was a deadbeat, so he couldn't afford anything more than cheap hot dogs. And that's when he said, I have a confession. And before I could reply, he said, I'm your dad. I felt so disgusted. I blocked him and then blocked him from my cell phone too. That's when he sends me a long text message explaining why he signed up to my OnlyFans. He said that he was just trying to get to know me, that all he really wanted was to get me back as his daughter. Then why ask for nudes? Part 3 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. As soon as I read his long text message about why he signed up, I once again blocked him. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Yep, it's my fucking father. Started knocking on the door so hard my neighbors came out. Called 911 and they came within a minute. I live in an area where there aren't too many people, so my house is really easy to find. Saw my dad walk to the backyard and try to get in through the back. That's when a cop stopped him and asked him what he was doing. Then he told the cop that I had invited him over. Then the cop comes to my door and asked me if I had invited him. I told him I didn't. Then I told the cop about OnlyFans. My dad was so ashamed he actually denied it. But of course I had all the receipts. I showed the cop my phone and the cop told him that he needed to leave me alone. He left my house and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom. But later that night I see another person sign up to my OnlyFans. Turns out it was my dad again. This time he was offering me $3,000 for more pictures. And he confessed that he couldn't help but love me as a woman because I didn't grow up with him. Excuse me, sir? You raised me for half of my childhood. Wanted to get a restraining order, but the judge says it's not that easy. So now I'm considering closing my OnlyFans. I don't think it's fair though. What should I do?
Story time about how my mom planned to kill me. Yes, I said my mother. So a little background information, I was 16 years old and I was in 11th grade. Now it's not like my mom hated me my whole life, because there was a time whenever she was super happy and she did really love me. Well, it all started whenever my dad had left her. She went into this deep depression. She quit her job. She wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. She stopped cooking, stopped cleaning, and she always blamed me because she thought it was my fault that our dad left. When in reality, my dad still texts me all the time asking how I'm doing. All of a sudden, a flip switch, my mom started cooking again, going to work. I never really ate her food because it low-key looked weird. But one day I came home from school and saw her putting rat poison in my food. And I wish I was kidding. But she's fucking crazy. So I said hi, but she didn't answer me. So I tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around and put a knife up to my neck. I ran out the door, called the police. They arrested her, and now I am happily living with my father and my non-crazy story time about the toxic boy that I almost started dating. So a little background information. Him and I both met on a set of a movie that we were in. Well, a few days into filming, he asked me out. So of course I said yes. And it was literally the most amazing first date ever. So he asked for a second date, and I said yes, of course. And the second date was terrible. He literally just tried to get in my pants the whole time. So then he asked me for a third date. And for some reason I said yes, hoping that it was not anything like the second date. And he didn't show up. So I pretty much got stood up. And then he even blocked my number. So a few months go by and I end up moving in with my best friend, about an hour away from where I was living when I met him. Well, the one night she came home and told me that he had messaged her on Instagram, which I thought was funny as hell because my best friend did not swing that way. So she pretends to flirt with him and asks him to come over. So he drives an hour to our apartment, and when he walks in, he just sees me standing in the kitchen. He immediately walked out.
Found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I met my boyfriend at the gym. Yeah, I know. Terrible idea. You can say it was lust at first sight. From the moment we saw each other at the gym, we couldn't take our eyes off each other. He came straight up to me at the gym and told me that he really liked me. But I was super shy. He was just some random guy I was meeting at the gym. But he was all about me. He asked me for my number and I said no. He asked me for my Instagram and I said no. For the next 2 weeks, he would come into the gym at exactly the same time I did. I would basically go work out whenever I had my lunch break. So of course, he would show up then. Of course, slowly but surely, he would charm me. He would even bring me lunch. After about 2 weeks, I finally gave him my phone number. That's when he asked me to go have breakfast, which I thought was weird. Should have been the first red flag, right? This was his excuse. He said he worked nights, but that his schedule would change all the time. So this meant that he would sometimes work during the day or at night. It was just random. So we went to breakfast. Here's the second red flag. He asked me if we could have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we lived. We both lived near the gym. Of course, I thought this was strange, but I said sure. He picked me up, and the whole time at breakfast, he kept looking at his phone. Part 2 is up. Just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. For our first date, we went to have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we both lived. Again, this was another red flag I ignored. During the breakfast, he was on his phone the entire time, and I called him out on it. I asked him why he invited me to breakfast if he was going to be on his phone all day. That's when he made up this whole sob story about how hard his work life was, how he was always stuck to his phone answering emails and text messages from his boss. And of course I believed it. I mean, I didn't know this guy from anything. After that, he put his phone down, and I realized he was the most amazing man I had ever met. A man that can make me laugh is really important to me. And we laughed the entire time. We were telling each other jokes. We talked about family and values. We talked about our favorite foods, countries we wanted to go to, places we had been to. It was the perfect date. We even loved the same type of music, and our favorite movie was the same. So as you can imagine, I completely fell head over heels for this man. But the red flags continued. A week after our first date, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Did I say yes? Of course I did. But this was just another red flag. He began love bombing me and always wanted to be with me. But he never invited me over to his place. Part 3 is up. I just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer is now my story time I sent him on Instagram. Every time I'd ask to go over to his place, he would say no. First off, he told me that he had a terrible roommate, that his roommate was noisy and really dirty and the apartment stank. So for that reason, he didn't want me to come over. And of course I said, yeah, that's fine. Here's the fourth red flag that I ignored. He would ask to come over to my apartment at odd hours. Sometimes he wanted to come over at 3 in the morning. Sometimes he wanted to come over super early. And other times he wanted to come over really late. Because I have a 9 to 5 job, I kept saying no. I needed to get my beauty sleep, please. But even if I said no, he would still come over. Here's the fifth red flag. He would come over to my apartment and instantly fall asleep on the couch. I was always asking him why he was so tired. And he would just say that it was too much work. Well, we've been dating now for 2 months. A few days ago, I started getting suspicious of his situation. So I showed up to his apartment. But he didn't live there. It was an office building. I asked him to come over and I confronted him. That's when he confessed that he is married. And that he's been married for 10 years. But he says that his wife is a nightmare and that he wants to divorce her. What should I do?
Story time about how my aunt kidnapped my dog. So a little background information, I was 14 and in 8th grade. I had a 4-month-old puppy that I would take care of because since I wanted the dog, my parents were like, you have to take care of him, blah, 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 blah. So I put him in the crate, went to school, came home, thought everything was good until my dog is missing. So now I'm like, what the fuck? Because it's literally a 4-month-old puppy. Anyways, I searched around the house to see if he maybe escaped or he was hiding under the beds or something, but he was nowhere to be found. So I asked the neighbors to keep a lookout for him and even put up missing posters everywhere. And when my parents got home, I told them the situation and they were like, oh, honey, he probably ran away, but he'll probably be back tonight. Yeah, fast forward 5 hours, he still wasn't home. So my dad was like, go to sleep. He'll be back in the morning. So I went to sleep, or I tried, but then I couldn't sleep, so I got up and got some melatonin. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my aunt kidnapped my dog. So like I said, my dad was like, go to sleep, and I went to try to go to sleep, but I couldn't because my dog was freaking missing. So I go downstairs to get some melatonin when I hear my dad talking shit on the phone to my aunt. He was talking about something with the dog, but my dumbass starts walking across the floor and all of a sudden the floor creaks, so I run upstairs, get back into bed, and go to sleep. So the next day after school, I tell my dad I'm going to go to my aunt's house because she didn't live too far away, and I thought, okay, well, maybe she's seen him run around her neighborhood, whatever. And he was like super off about it at first. But he was like, fine, whatever, go to your aunt's house. So I get to her house and I walk in and I hear dogs barking. One dog, because she didn't have any fucking dogs. And I walk over to the backyard, and what do you know? My puppy is sitting in her fucking backyard. So I brought my dog home and told my dad. And he got really mad. It turns out he didn't even want the dog in the first place, so he gave her to my aunt. He apologized and we're good now, but